Welcome to Money Making Minds YouTube channel. I don't know about you, but I am just constantly fascinated by these stories. The people who decide, okay, I'm not going to rob a bank with a gun. No,
Right.
I'm going to convince the bank manager to give me the money willingly.
Uh-huh. It's a whole different level of operation.
It really is. So today, we're embarking on this deep dive into the most audacious, sometimes infuriating, sometimes just plain weird world of history's biggest scams. We're really leaning into some fantastic research out there, dissecting let's call it the anatomy of financial and psychological manipulation.
It's true. And we're not talking about petty theft here. This is about the colossal cons, the ones so brilliantly put together they actually reshaped economies, destroyed lives, often right here in the U.S., which is, really striking.
Yeah.
These are the schemes where afterwards everyone, regulators, victims, the public, they're all just asking how. How on earth did they get away with this for so long right out in the open?
Exactly. So the core topic is really the big leagues of financial fraud. We're looking at those massive figures, the Bernie Madoffs who made billions just evaporate. Or, the ones built purely on psychological nerve, like Victor Lustig trying to sell the Eiffel Tower, a national landmark he didn't own.
Twice.
It's unbelievable.
So our mission today, really, is to break down these incredible stories. We need to understand the structure, what's going on behind the curtain.
Yeah.
It's not just what happened when they finally collapsed. It's why people fell for them. And I mean, smart people, sophisticated investors, even the regulatory bodies sometimes,
Right.
we're trying to hunt down those psychological patterns, the ones that, frankly, still apply today. Whether you're looking at a flashy tech IPO pitch in Silicon Valley or, some too-good-to-be-true real estate fund, the playbook is often disturbingly similar.
And what you see again and again in this kind of analysis is that every single one of these major scams, they tap into something really primal in us, our ambition, maybe our greed.
Oh, definitely greed.
Our need to trust people who look like they're in charge.
Authority figures.
And that horrible feeling, the fear of missing out, FOMO, right? It paralyzes your critical thinking.
Absolutely. The greatest con artists, they weren't just criminals in the simple sense. They were master manipulators. They understood human psychology deeply.
Yeah.
What's so consistent, whether you look back at, say, 1920s Boston with Ponzi or Wall Street in 2008 with Madoff, is that the truly big fraudsters, they were performers. They were actors, applied psychologists almost. They understood that the bigger the lie sometimes and the more authoritative the person telling it, well, the less likely people are to actually check the math or ask the hard questions.
Okay, let's try and unpack that a bit. Based on the patterns we see in the research, what makes up the anatomy of a really great, really successful, particularly a US-based scam? What are the common threads?
Yeah, we see about 4 characteristics that keep popping up. First one is just audacity beyond belief. The scale of the lie. It has to be so huge, so outrageous that normal skepticism just, it doesn't kick in.
Like it short-circuits your brain.
Kind of. Think about the scale. Madoff, operating as this respected elder statesman of finance, running a massive fraud secretly in a major Manhattan skyscraper. The very size of it acts like camouflage. You instinctively think, well, no one person could possibly try to fool this many powerful people, this many institutions.
Yeah.
It seems too big to be fake.
Right. And secondly, you mentioned psychology. It's always a masterclass in exploiting human psychology.
Always. They don't just ask for your money straight up. They tap into that deep-seated American desire for the inside track, the exclusive deal, the secret advantage, the shortcut to getting rich.
And make you feel special, like you're one of the smart ones.
Exactly. You're in on the secret. You've found a way to beat the system, the inefficient market that holds everyone else back. It's incredibly flattering.
Okay, number 3.
Crucially, the veneer of legitimacy. These people, they never look like your stereotypical criminal. They look like successful business people. We're talking impeccable credentials, maybe former high-ranking government jobs.
The expensive suits, the confidence.
Oh, the confidence is key. It just radiates success and overrides our, basic safety instincts. If someone looks incredibly successful, we automatically assume they are successful and that their wealth must come from whatever amazing opportunity they're now offering us access to.
Makes sense. And the last one.
And finally, a lot of the really big ones, the ones that make history, are the long con.
Right, not quick grabs.
No, exactly. These aren't smash and grab jobs. They are elaborate productions. They take years, sometimes decades to set up. They involve incredibly complex layers of paperwork, fake documents, deception, all designed to make unraveling the truth incredibly difficult. especially for, let's be honest, often understaffed and under-resourced regulatory bodies.
That long game, that longevity, that's what really separates a minor fraudster from someone like Bernie Madoff who becomes a household name for the wrong reasons.
It's also really important to remember these cons often exploit specific moments in time. You know, big economic booms where everyone gets a bit irrational.
Like the dot-com bubble.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or major technological shifts that create these complex new areas. Think crypto now, where the rules and the oversight haven't quite caught up yet. It's like the old saying, whenever there's a gold rush, the people making the real money are often the ones selling the shovels. Or, in this case, maybe selling the map to a mine that doesn't exist.
Okay, that sets the stage perfectly. So let's start at arguably the beginning. The man who basically invented the modern playbook for financial fraud. The scheme that literally gave its name to a whole category of crime.
Charles Ponzi.
We have to start with Charles Ponzi, or Carlo Ponzi originally. He arrives in America in 1903, basically broke, but he's got this huge ambition, chasing the American dream like so many others.
Yeah, he fully expected, the streets paved with gold cliché. And when they weren't, well, that ambition didn't just disappear. It kind of morphed into finding a shortcut, a way around the hard work.
And he got an early education in how not to run a legitimate business, didn't he?
Oh, he did. A terrible education in financial malpractice, basically. Around 1907, up in Montreal, Canada, he gets a job at Banco Zarossi. Now, this was a bank specifically for Italian immigrants.
Okay.
And the bank paid really attractive interest rates, something like 5%, which was great for depositors. The problem was the bank was investing the money really poorly, or maybe not investing it much at all.
So wait, how are they paying the interest then?
There's the rub. They were paying the old depositors, using the money brought in by the brand new depositors walking through the door that day.
Oh boy. Does that sound familiar?
It's the classic structure, right?
Yeah.
Ponzi was getting a real-time, hands-on masterclass in the mechanics of a financial fraud. He saw exactly how it worked from the inside.
And what happened to that bank?
Predictably, it collapsed. In 1908, the owner took the money and fled to Mexico. Now, a normal person might see that and think, okay, that's unethical, that's illegal, that's wrong.
Right.
But Ponzi, he seems to have internalized a different lesson. He thought the structure of the scheme itself was brilliant. It just needed, a better cover story.
Yeah.
Better window dressing, as he apparently called it. Something more plausible than just hoping nobody noticed.
And he found that window dressing in 1919 in something incredibly mundane, the postal system.
Exactly. The International Reply Coupon, the IRC. Just this little slip of paper you could get with a letter from overseas, exchangeable for postage stamps back home.
Seems pretty boring.
Totally boring. But Ponzi looked at it, and he knew that after World War I, currency exchange rates were absolutely haywire all over Europe.
Okay.
So he comes up with this idea. He claims he can exploit an arbitrage opportunity. Buy these IRCs super cheap in countries where the currency was weak, like post-war Italy or Spain, and then redeem them here in America where the dollar was strong for postage stamps worth much more. He claimed this could generate a theoretical profit of, get this, up to 600%.
600%. Okay, now that gets people's attention. That was the hook.
That was the hook. He apparently rushed home, told his wife, Rose, I found the key, unlimited wealth, all based on what looked like a genuine, if complicated, market inefficiency.
So let's dissect that, the reality versus the pitch, because the pitch sounds almost plausible if you don't know the details.
Right. The idea of arbitrage, buying low in one market and selling high in another, that's theoretically sound. That's how markets work. But the reality of using IRCs for this was completely absurd. It was impossible to scale up.
Why?
Well, for starters, these coupons were meant for personal letters, maybe small packages, not industrial-level currency speculation. The research shows there were only about 27,000 of these IRCs in existence in the entire world at that time.
27,000. Okay, and how many would he have needed to actually generate the profits he was promising?
To sustain the kind of returns he was guaranteeing, calculations show he would have needed to somehow buy and redeem about 160 million IRCs.
Million? From a pool of 27,000.
Exactly. The logistics alone were impossible. The transaction costs would eat any profit, the sheer volume needed. It was physically impossible, mathematically impossible, logistically, a complete fantasy.
But he knew that, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely. Because Ponzi understood he wasn't actually selling an investment product. He was selling the American dream. He was selling hope. It was performance art, really.
So he starts his company, the Securities Exchange Company, in Boston, and the promise.
The promise was insane. 50% return on your investment in just 45 days, or double your money in 90 days, guaranteed.
Guaranteed. How did he manage that initially?
Simple. He paid his very first investors exactly on time, using the money brought in by the investors who walked in the door 5 minutes later.
Classic. Robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Textbook. And this created that crucial positive feedback loop. Those early investors, overjoyed with their returns, they spread the word like wildfire, especially through Boston's tight-knit Italian immigrant community.
People wanted to believe, they wanted to trust one of their own who seemed to have figured out how to beat the system, beat the banks.
Precisely. And Ponzi's office, it became this theater of success. He wasn't shy about showing off his newfound wealth.
No, he had the chauffeur, right? The fancy suits, the huge mansion out in Lexington.
12 rooms, heated swimming pool. This was 1920. Every visible sign of success just acted like a magnet, pulling in more investors. Because they assumed, quite logically, that his wealth was coming from this amazing IRC scheme he was offering them access to.
And he played the part in the office, too.
Oh, yeah. Total showmanship. Investors would come in to collect their 50% profit, and there he is, behind this massive desk, cash piled up, counting it out with a flourish. Phones ringing off the hook, employees rushing around looking busy. It created this powerful illusion of a massive, thriving, incredibly profitable operation.
And how much money are we talking about here?
By July 1920, it's estimated he'd taken in about $15 million, which, in today's money, is somewhere around $200 million, from maybe 40,000 hopeful investors.
Wow. And the truly staggering thing, the core of the con, is that he hadn't actually bought any IRCs to make this happen.
Not a single one. Zero. The entire thing was built on fiction, sustained purely by the ever-increasing volume of new cash flowing in.
But that kind of exponential growth, promising 50% every 45 days, it can't last, right? The math just doesn't work.
It's mathematically self-defeating. It has to collapse. When you owe those kinds of returns, the amount you owe grows geometrically. $1 million owed today becomes over $11 million owed just 6 months down the line. It was always just a ticking time bomb.
So what started the collapse?
It started with some skeptical analysis. In July 1920, a financial writer published an article basically pointing out the absurdity of the sheer number of IRCs Ponzi would need. It just wasn't possible.
Okay, so the math started getting scrutinized.
Right. And then came the big blow. The Boston Post newspaper ran a huge expose. They dug into his past and revealed he actually had a criminal record, including prison time up in Canada for forgery and smuggling immigrants.
That must have killed it, right? Proof he's a criminal.
You'd think so.
Yeah.
But here's where the psychology gets really fascinating and, frankly, kind of scary. The loyalty of his investors was so strong, many of them refused to believe it.
No way.
Yes. They accused the newspapers of running fake news, said it was all planted by the jealous banks, the establishment that Ponzi claimed he was beating. They actually held rallies supporting Ponzi, publicly burning copies of the Boston Post in the street.
Wow. They wanted the dream to be real so badly they just ignored the facts right in front of them.
They were completely invested, emotionally and financially. The final collapse was triggered by a run on his company, people demanding their money back all at once. And then a state-mandated audit confirmed the inevitable truth.
How bad was it?
He owed about $20 million to investors. He only had about $4 million left. The rest was gone. Spent, paid out to early investors, vanished.
So the core lesson from Ponzi, the one that gives this scheme its name, it really holds true, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Impossible returns are impossible. No matter how charming the salesperson is, no matter how clever the story sounds. If it seems too good to be true.
It almost certainly is. Okay, now let's jump way forward, almost 90 years. To the man who took Ponzi's basic blueprint and perfected it, scaled it up for the modern, complex financial world, Bernie Madoff.
Madoff, yeah. The sheer scale of his betrayal. It makes Ponzi look like a pickpocket, honestly.
Madoff pulled off what's estimated as a $65 billion lie, and he did it by completely mastering that veneer of impeccable legitimacy.
Totally. He wasn't some outsider like Ponzi initially was. Madoff was the establishment, former chairman of the NASDAQ Hugh Stock Exchange, a pillar of Wall Street, a respected philanthropist donating huge sums, operating out of the very fancy Listic building in Midtown Manhattan. That reputation, that was his ultimate weapon, his camouflage.
And this is where Madoff was maybe smarter, or at least different, than Ponzi in his approach. Ponzi promised insane returns, 50% in 45 days. That screams skingam if you stop and think.
Right. Madoff understood that to fool sophisticated investors, hedge funds, charities, wealthy families, you couldn't promise the moon. So what did he promise? Steady, consistent annual returns. around 10 to 12%, year in, year out.
Okay, why was 10 to 12% the magic number?
Psychologically, it was perfect. It was good. Better than the market average most years, especially good during downturns. So it was definitely enviable on Wall Street.
Uh-huh.
But crucially, it wasn't so high that it automatically triggered flashing red lights and sirens for regulators or auditors. It seemed plausible if you believed Madoff was just a genius investor.
The consistency, though,
Certainly.
that should have been the flag, right? Getting 10, 12% every year, no matter if the market was up 30% or down 30%.
That was the true red flag. But people rationalized it. They thought, well, it's Bernie, he has a secret sauce. They dismissed the impossibility because of the man's reputation.
And his masterstroke, the real piece of psychological genius in his con, was this idea of exclusivity.
Oh, absolutely brilliant. He cultivated this aura that you couldn't just, walk in off the street and invest with Bernie Madoff. Oh, no. You needed an introduction. You had to know someone. He famously would sometimes turn away potential clients, even big institutions with lots of money.
Why would he do that? Turn away money?
Because rejection creates desire. It made people absolutely desperate to get in. They thought, wow, this guy is so successful, he doesn't even need my money. This must be the real deal. They stopped thinking critically because the scheme wasn't being pushed on them. They felt like they had to beg for access to his genius.
So that feeling of being part of an exclusive club, of being chosen, it overrode due diligence.
Completely. That manufactured exclusivity, ironically, was probably the biggest red flag of them all. It weaponized FOMO perfectly.
Okay, so how did the actual lie work mechanically? He wasn't really trading, was he? He claimed he used this really complicated strategy.
Right? He called it a split strike conversion option strategy. Even the name sounds complicated and intimidating, right?
Yeah, I have no idea what that means.
And that was intentional. The jargon was designed to baffle most investors and, crucially, most SEC investigators, too. It sounded sophisticated enough that people just nodded along.
But in reality,
The vast majority of the money, billions and billions of dollars, just sat in a regular business checking account at Chase Manhattan Bank. It wasn't being invested much at all.
so how did he run the fraud itself?
He ran the actual fraud operation from a completely separate secret office on the 17th floor of the Lipstick Building, totally separate from his legitimate market-making business downstairs. A small, loyal team worked up there, using surprisingly old-fashioned methods, like literally just typing up fake documents to generate fake trade confirmation statements.
Ah, the paperwork.
The paperwork was key. These fake statements detailed all the supposed trades, buying and selling stocks and options that never actually happened.
So the genius was making the documentation look perfect. The investment business wasn't real, but the paper trail looked absolutely legitimate, explaining how he was supposedly generating those steady 10, 12% returns.
Exactly. It made it appear that the consistent returns were the result of brilliant trading, not just new money coming in to pay off old investors. Same core as Ponzi, just vastly more sophisticated window dressing.
And Madoff's scheme also relied heavily on something called affinity fraud, didn't it? Targeting specific groups.
Yes, tragically so. He very successfully targeted and betrayed tight-knit communities, particularly wealthy Jewish individuals, families, and major charitable organizations, especially in New York and Palm Beach.
Why does that work so well for fraudsters?
Because people inherently trust members of their own community, their friends, their neighbors, people you go to synagogue with, people on the boards of the same charities. You let your guard down. It's almost impossible to imagine that someone from within that trusted circle would be ruthlessly betraying you. Elie Wiesel's foundation lost over $15 million. Countless other charities were devastated.
But the really infuriating part of the Madoff story, looking back, is the systemic failure of oversight. People did raise alarms, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. And years before the collapse. A financial analyst named Harry Markopoulos, he basically figured it out and submitted detailed, credible reports to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, multiple times, starting way back in the year 2000.
2000. 8 years before it blew up. What did he tell them?
He laid out specific, verifiable reasons why Madoff's operation had to be a fraud. He showed it was mathematically impossible.
Like what?
Like the returns were too consistent, impossibly smooth. Like the sheer volume of options trading Madoff claimed he was doing was way too high for the actual market capacity for those specific options. There literally weren't enough options being traded for his story to be true.
Okay, that seems pretty concrete.
Maybe the most damning obvious red flag Markopoulos pointed out: Madoff's auditor. You'd expect a multi-billion-dollar fund to be audited by a big global accounting firm, right?
Yeah, like one of the big four now.
Madoff's auditor was a tiny, basically unknown 3-person firm operating out of a little office in a strip mall in Rockland County, New York, miles away from Wall Street.
A strip mall auditor for a $65 billion operation.
It's insane. That detail alone should have set off massive alarms at the SEC. But it didn't.
So why did the SEC fail to act? They investigated him multiple times, didn't they?
They did.
Yeah.
At least 5 times over the years. But reports suggest the investigators were often relatively inexperienced. They were reportedly intimidated by Madoff's stature and his connections.
He charmed them.
Apparently, he was confident, dismissive of their questions. They seemed to lack the specific technical expertise to really push back hard when he threw around the complex jargon of the split strike strategy. His reputation acted like this massive psychological shield. It's Bernie Madoff. He wouldn't do that.
So what finally brought it down?
It wasn't brilliant investigation, unfortunately. It was the global financial crisis of 2008. The market turmoil caused a huge wave of investors wanting their money back. Suddenly, Madoff got hit with about $7 billion in withdrawal requests all at once.
And the money wasn't there.
The money wasn't there. He couldn't meet the redemptions. He knew the game was up. He confessed the whole thing, the one big lie, to his 2 sons who worked in the legitimate part of his firm but were unaware of the fraud.
And they turned him in?
Immediately.
Uh-huh.
They went straight to the authorities the next day.
The final cost, $65 billion in paper losses, just wiped out.
Wiped out life savings for thousands of ordinary people, retirees, families, devastated major charities and university endowments. The personal tragedy was just immense.
Yeah.
At least 4 people directly connected to the fund took their own lives, including Madoff's older son, Mark, who died by suicide exactly 2 years to the day after his father's arrest. It was just a staggering, heartbreaking betrayal that proved the old Ponzi blueprint, dressed up in a fancy Wall Street suit and tie, could fool almost everyone.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. We've seen these massive financial frauds driven by individuals like Ponzi and Madoff. Now let's look at deception happening at a huge corporate and even technological level, starting with Enron.
Ah, Enron. The House of Cards in Houston. Their story is almost unbelievable. They start out in 1985 as this really boring, straightforward natural gas pipeline company. Nothing exciting.
Right, old economy stuff.
Totally. But then, under CEO Kenneth Lay, and especially his protege, Jeffrey Skilling, they get this grand vision. They want to revolutionize energy markets, ride the wave of deregulation, move away from owning boring pipes, and become this sophisticated trading platform for energy contracts, bandwidth, weather derivatives, you name it.
And they were celebrated for it. Right, Fortune magazine named them America's most innovative company like 6 years in a row.
6 years running. They were the darlings of Wall Street, the symbol of the dynamic new economy. The problem was their success quickly became focused almost entirely on pumping up their stock price, not on actually generating sustainable, real profits.
So what was the foundational lie? How did they create this illusion of massive growth and profitability?
It really came down to an accounting trick. A method championed by Skilling called mark-to-market accounting. I should probably spend a minute on this because it's kind of the key to the whole financial side of the fraud.
Okay, lay it out. What is mark-to-market?
Normally, if you sign, say, a 20-year contract to supply energy, you book the revenue gradually as you actually deliver the energy and earn the money over those 20 years.
Yeah.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah, you earn it, you book it.
Mark-to-market completely flipped that. It allowed Enron to estimate the total future profit they thought they would make over the entire life of that 20-year deal and book all of that estimated profit immediately on day 1, the day the contract was signed.
Wait, so they booked profit they hadn't actually earned yet based entirely on a guess about the future?
Exactly. Based on often wildly optimistic, sometimes completely fictional guesses about future energy prices, future market conditions, 20 years down the line.
That sounds incredibly dangerous. It creates massive incentives to just be optimistic, right?
Massive perverse incentives. Traders and executives were rewarded with huge bonuses, not for actually making money for the company long term, but for signing deals, any deals, and making the most aggressive, rosy predictions about future profits. Skilling even applied this method to totally speculative ventures, like trying to create a market for trading internet bandwidth for video streaming. The profit estimates there were pure fantasy.
So what happened when these hyper-optimistic estimates inevitably didn't pan out, when the future profits didn't actually arrive?
Then they had a huge problem. They had booked all this phantom profit, but now they had real losses or underperforming assets. They had to hide that mounting debt and those losses somewhere.
And this is where the CFO, Andrew Fastow, comes in with his creative accounting structure.
Exactly. Fasto becomes the architect of deception. He creates hundreds, literally hundreds of these off-balance sheet entities called special purpose entities, or SPEs.
Right, these were the ones with the completely ridiculous names, weren't they? Like something out of Star Wars.
Totally. Chuko, Raptor, Jedi. I mean, the names themselves almost seems like a joke, but their purpose was deadly serious.
Yeah.
Accounting manipulation.
How did they work? What did they do?
The basic idea was to move massive amounts of Enron's debt and poorly performing assets off Enron's main balance sheet and into these SPEs. This made Enron's own financial statements look much healthier than they really were. It hid the true extent of the company's liabilities from investors, from credit rating agencies, from regulators.
Were these SPEs truly independent, though?
That was the key violation. Accounting rules required these SPEs to have a certain amount of independent outside equity, usually at least 3%, to be considered genuinely separate from Enron. But Fasto structured many of them so that they didn't meet this rule. They were essentially just puppets of Enron, controlled by Enron executives like Fasto himself, who personally made millions managing them. They weren't separate at all. They were just accounting garbage cans designed to mask the truth.
And all this financial engineering, this deception, it was happening within a specific kind of corporate culture at Enron, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. A toxic culture of arrogance, right from the top. Skilling famously implemented the brutal rank-and-yank performance review system.
Explain that. What was rank and yank?
Every year, managers had to rank all their employees, and the bottom 15% or so were automatically fired, yanked, regardless of context or longer-term value.
Wow. That sounds incredibly stressful.
It created a pressure cooker. It incentivized ruthless internal competition, backstabbing, and crucially, focusing only on short-term results and reporting profits, even if they weren't real. Because if you didn't look good on paper right now, you could be out the door.
So nobody wanted to speak up? Nobody wanted to question the aggressive accounting or the optimistic projections?
Absolutely not. There was this intense pressure to conform, to be loyal to the Enron way, to believe in the genius of Lay and Skilling. Questioning the numbers, pointing out problems, that was seen as disloyal, as not being a team player. It was professional suicide. People were terrified.
And where were the auditors in all this? Arthur Andersen, one of the biggest accounting firms in the world at the time.
Yeah, the complicity of Arthur Andersen is a huge part of the Enron scandal. They were supposed to be the independent watchdog, ensuring the books were accurate.
Ugh.
But Enron was their huge client. Arthur Andersen was earning massive fees from Enron, not just for auditing, but also for lucrative consulting work. Something like $50 million a year in total revenue.
$50 million a year. That's a big incentive to look the other way.
A massive conflict of interest. They prioritized keeping that huge revenue stream over their professional duty to challenge Enron's dodgy accounting. They signed off on the fraudulent accounts year after year, and that complicity ultimately destroyed them. Arthur Andersen, one of the big five global firms, was convicted of obstruction of justice related to Enron and effectively collapsed. Gone.
And the rot at Enron, it wasn't just confined to the accounting department, was it? It went deeper.
Oh, much deeper. It extended into just pure sociopathic profit-seeking, with real human consequences. The most shocking example is the California energy crisis in 2000-2001.
What happened there?
Transcripts and recordings later revealed that Enron traders deliberately manipulated the California energy market to drive up prices and make huge profits. They would intentionally take power plants offline during peak demand periods, creating artificial shortages, causing rolling blackouts across California, and sending electricity prices soaring.
They caused blackouts on purpose.
On purpose.
You're right.
For profit. And the tapes got them laughing about it, joking about ripping off Grandma Millie in California, bragging about how much money they were making from the state's misery. It showed a company culture that wasn't just about aggressive business. It was about active contempt for the consequences of their actions on real people.
Just staggering. So the final cost when Enron finally imploded in late 2001?
Enormous. About $63 billion in shareholder value just vanished. Almost overnight. But the most tragic cost, again, was borne by ordinary Americans. Thousands of Enron employees didn't just lose their jobs, they lost their entire retirement savings.
Why they're saving?
Because their 401k plans were heavily invested in Enron stock. And often during the final death spiral, there was an administrative blackout period where they were legally prevented from selling their shares, even as the price cratered towards zero. They were trapped, watching their futures disappear.
Okay, from Enron's complex financial lies, let's pivot to a more recent and maybe even more audacious corporate deception. Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. This one feels very Silicon Valley.
Oh, Theranos' peak Silicon Valley hubris meets outright fraud.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Holmes drops out of Stanford at 19. She has this incredibly compelling vision. Revolutionize healthcare by running hundreds of complex blood tests using just a single tiny drop of blood from a finger prick, all done on a sleek proprietary machine called the Edison.
I mean, that sounds amazing, democratizing blood testing, making it cheap, easy, accessible.
It was a genuinely revolutionary idea. If it worked, it would have changed medicine. The problem, the core, simple problem was the technology fundamentally did not work. It never reliably worked as promised.
But she still managed to raise hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, right? From some really big names.
Over $700 million. From very sophisticated investors, venture capitalists, even people like Larry Ellison and Tim Draper. All based purely on the potential, the promise of the technology, not on any verifiable working reality.
How did she pull that off? How did she maintain the illusion for so long?
She was brilliant at playing the Silicon Valley game. First, she aggressively cultivated this veneer of Silicon Valley legitimacy.
The black turtleneck, the deep voice.
Exactly. She consciously modeled herself after Steve Jobs. The black turtleneck became her uniform. She reportedly even intentionally lowered the pitch of her voice to sound more authoritative, more commanding. It was all part of the performance.
But it wasn't just the image, was it? The board she assembled was incredible.
Incredible and incredibly misleading. She stacked the Theranos board not with leading scientists or medical experts, but with political heavyweights. Former Secretary of State George Shultz, former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, former Secretary of Defense William Perry, former senators.
Wow. Why would a blood testing startup need all those former statesmen on its board?
Because it creates a massive authority bias. It projects instant credibility, even if none of those distinguished gentlemen knew the first thing about blood chemistry or diagnostic engineering.
So investors saw George Shultz on the board and just thought,
They thought, wow, if George Shultz believes in this, if Henry Kissinger is involved, it must be legitimate. They must have vetted it. They suspended their own critical thinking. They outsourced their due diligence to the reputation of the board members. It was a brilliant, cynical tactic to bypass uncomfortable technical questions.
so the Edison machines, the core technology, they weren't working in the labs. What did Theranos actually do when they started offering tests to the public, like through their deal with Walgreens?
This is where it moves from misleading investors to outright dangerous fraud against patients. They implemented a fraudulent workaround.
What was that?
The breathtaking reality is this. Theranos ran the vast majority of the patient blood tests, the ones real people were getting in Walgreens and Safeway clinics, not on their revolutionary Edison machines, but on standard, commercially available blood analyzers made by companies like Siemens, machines they bought off the shelf.
They used regular machines, but advertised their own tech.
Yes, and worse, because their whole premise was based on using just a tiny finger prick sample of blood, but the standard Siemens machines needed a larger volume from a traditional vein draw. They had to secretly dilute those tiny finger prick samples to get enough volume to run them on the conventional machines.
Wait, they diluted the blood samples. Why is that so bad in medical testing?
Dilution completely screws up the accuracy. It's fundamental chemistry. Diluting a sample means the concentration of whatever you're trying to measure, glucose, cholesterol, potassium, cancer markers, is no longer accurate.
So the results they were giving back to patients.
Were dangerously inaccurate, potentially wildly inaccurate. This put patients at grave risk. Imagine getting a false positive for cancer or HIV, or getting a falsely low reading for a critical medication like blood thinners, leading your doctor to prescribe the wrong dosage, or missing a diagnosis of diabetes. They weren't just lying to investors about technology, they were actively compromising patient health and safety on a massive scale. It's horrifying.
And inside the company, how did they keep the secret? How did they stop employees from blowing the whistle?
The internal culture was incredibly toxic, defined by extreme secrecy and intimidation. The company was run like a fortress, strictly compartmentalized.
What does that mean, compartmentalized?
It means different teams weren't allowed to talk to each other about their work. The lab scientists who knew the Edison devices were failing were kept separate from the marketing and business teams who were out selling the fantasy to Walgreens and investors. Information was strictly controlled from the top by Holmes and her COO, Sunny Balwani.
And if someone did figure it out and try to speak up,
They were dealt with ruthlessly. Whistleblowers like Tyler Shultz, who was actually George Shultz's grandson and worked at Theranos for a time, faced aggressive threats, teams of expensive lawyers, surveillance, intimidation. The message was clear. Challenge the vision, Question the narrative and we will destroy you. The vision had to be protected at all costs, even the human cost.
So how did it finally unravel?
It unraveled thanks to investigative journalism. John Kerry Rue at the Wall Street Journal, spurred by tips from whistleblowers like Tyler Schultz, published a series of devastating articles starting in 2015, exposing the lies about the technology and the inaccurate testing.
That must have opened the floodgates.
It did. Regulators, who had previously been somewhat charmed or intimidated, finally stepped in. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, inspected the labs and found major deficiencies, eventually concluding there was immediate jeopardy to patient health and safety. That was the nail in the coffin.
And the consequences for Holmes.
The company collapsed. Holmes and Bolwani were indicted. Holmes was eventually convicted on multiple counts of defrauding investors and sentenced to more than 11 years in federal prison. Bolwani got nearly 13 years.
So the lesson from Theranos, especially for the U.S. tech world.
It's a brutal lesson.
Yeah.
It shows the catastrophic danger of applying that common Silicon Valley mantra, fake it till you make it, to something like medicine. It might work, maybe, for a social media app where the consequences of failure are low, but when you're dealing with physics, chemistry, biology, and people's actual health, you can't fake it. Reality bites back hard, and people get hurt.
Okay, let's shift again. We've looked at financial cons, corporate cons, tech cons. Now let's look at scams built almost entirely on image, on lifestyle, on pure, unadulterated salesmanship and excess. And you almost have to start with Jordan Belfort, right? The Wolf of Wall Street.
Oh yeah, Belfort.
Okay.
He absolutely perfected the sleazy, high-pressure pump-and-dump scheme through his firm Stratton Oakmont. This was mainly in the late 80s and through the 90s.
So what was the model? What was a boiler room like Stratton Oakmont?
It was basically a factory for fraud. Belfort recruited these young, hyper-aggressive, often morally unburdened salesmen, guys hungry for money and status. He then trained them in these incredibly high-pressure sales scripts,
Who are they targeting?
primarily middle-class Americans, regular people. They'd start by building trust, maybe getting the client into a couple of small, legitimate trades in well-known blue-chip stocks, just to get them comfortable, get them hooked.
Like a loss leader almost. Gain their confidence first.
Exactly. It's the classic con setup. Establish trust with something small and real. Then, once the client trusted their broker, they'd pivot hard into the fraudulent sales pitch.
It sure was.
They'd push these clients into buying huge amounts of highly speculative, basically worthless penny stocks. These were stocks in tiny, unknown companies, often trading for pennies or dollars a share. Crucially, these stocks were very illiquid, meaning there wasn't much trading volume, which made them easy for Stratton Oakmont to manipulate.
So how did the pump and dump work?
It was brutal and simple. The army of brokers would cold call relentlessly, using hyped-up, often completely false information to create excitement and demand for a specific penny stock. This intense buying pressure would drive the price up artificially. That's the pump. While the brokers were pumping the stock to their clients, Belfort and his inner circle, who often owned huge chunks of the stock already, sometimes secretly, would be waiting. As the price peaked from all the artificial buying, they would sell off their massive holdings into that inflated demand that's the dump.
And what happened to the clients who bought during the pump?
They were left holding the bag. As soon as Belfort and his cronies dumped their shares, the buying pressure vanished, and the stock price would inevitably collapse back to pennies or even zero. The clients, often people who'd invested their savings, money for college, retirement funds, were wiped out. Meanwhile, the brokers made enormous commissions, sometimes as high as 50%, just for pushing the worthless stock.
50% commission? That's insane. No wonder they were motivated.
Totally insane. And all that money, hundreds of millions generated by defrauding regular people, funded this absolutely legendary lifestyle of unfathomable excess.
The stories from the book and the movie are just wild.
Beyond wild. We're talking routine, rampant use of illegal drugs like quaaludes, cocaine, you name it, non-stop debauched parties. The infamous stories of hiring performers for degrading acts like dwarf-tossing contests in the office, yachts, helicopters, crashing expensive cars. It was like Caligula runs a brokerage firm.
Do you think that excessive lifestyle just a side effect of the money, or was it part of the scam itself?
That's a great question. I think it was actually part of the business model in a weird way. That outrageous, over-the-top, almost cartoonish lifestyle served as its own kind of twisted credibility.
How so?
It screamed success to the young, hungry brokers working there. It told them, see, this system works. This is what happens when you follow the script. This is the reward. And maybe indirectly, it even signaled to some clients, these guys are making so much money, they must be geniuses. The louder the party, the more real the whole illusion seemed.
But the cost to the victims was immense. Stratton Oakmont stole hundreds of millions of dollars from ordinary families.
Hundreds of millions. Real people, real lives, ruined. Which makes the whole redemption question around Jordan Belfort particularly frustrating for many people.
Yeah, talk about that. He didn't serve much time, did he?
Despite the massive scale of the fraud, he only served 22 months in prison, which is incredibly light. He got a reduced sentence because he cooperated with the prosecutors and testified against his former colleagues.
Okay, cooperation gets you leniency, but the restitution.
He was ordered to pay $110 million back to his victims. But numerous reports over the years have shown he's only paid back a relatively small fraction of that. He seems to prioritize his own lavish lifestyle over making his victims whole.
And then he immediately turns around and profits from his crimes.
Exactly. He writes the memoir, The Wolf of Wall Street, which becomes a huge bestseller. Then it gets made into a blockbuster Hollywood movie directed by Martin Scorsese. He reinvents himself as a motivational speaker, charging huge fees to teach sales techniques, often the same manipulative techniques he used at Stratton Oakmont.
So he's literally monetized his infamy.
Hugely. He's arguably made more money legitimately talking about his crimes than he ever paid back to the people he stole from. It raises really uncomfortable questions about whether society rewards celebrity criminals and whether his redemption narrative is genuine or just another calculated performance.
That focus on image, on performance, on selling a lifestyle, it leads us perfectly into a very modern scam. The Fire Festival.
Oh, Fire Festival. The ultimate scam for the Instagram age. This was 2017, the brainchild, if you can call it that, of Billy McFarland, who was already kind of a serial, small-time fraudster, and the rapper Ja Rule.
What was the pitch?
The pitch was pure aspirational fantasy. They were going to launch this ultra-exclusive, super luxury music festival on a private island in the Bahamas, supposedly once owned by Pablo Escobar.
Okay, exclusivity and danger, nice combo. How did they market it?
They weaponized modern marketing, specifically influencer marketing, brilliantly. McFarlane spent a fortune paying huge sums to supermodels and social media influencers, Kendall Jenner, Bella Hadid, Emily Ratajkowski, people like that.
For what?
To post these slickly produced promotional videos and simultaneously post just a plain orange square on their Instagram feeds, all linking to the Fire Festival website. It created this massive coordinated buzz. Suddenly, Fire Festival was everywhere online. It looked like the coolest, most exclusive event imaginable.
Selling FOMO. Pure fear of missing out.
Pure, uncut FOMO, combined with the allure of hanging out with celebrities and models on a tropical paradise. They sold tickets for thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars, promising luxury villas, gourmet food prepared by celebrity chefs, yachts, top music acts, yet her works.
The reality.
The reality gap was catastrophic. Attendees, many of whom had spent huge amounts of money, arrived on the island expecting paradise. Instead, they found chaos.
What kind of chaos?
Instead of luxury villas, there were flimsy, half-built disaster relief tents, some still in their boxes. The site was basically an unfinished gravel pit. There was inadequate food, water, security, sanitation, medical facilities, everything.
And the famous sad cheese sandwich.
The sad cheese sandwich in the styrofoam container became the instant viral symbol of the whole disaster. Instead of gourmet meals, people got cold processed cheese on untoasted bread with a limp-side salad. It perfectly encapsulated the chasm between the glossy Instagram promise and the grim reality.
How could it go so wrong? Did McFarlane just not know what he was doing?
He had absolutely zero experience organizing anything remotely like a music festival. He reportedly ignored every single warning from the few experienced professionals he did hire. They told him it was impossible to pull off of the time frame, that the site wasn't ready, that they didn't have the infrastructure.
But he pushed ahead anyway.
He seemed to believe he could manifest reality through sheer confidence and hype. He refused to postpone it, even as everything was clearly falling apart. It was like he thought if he just believed hard enough, the luxury villas would magically appear.
There was that unbelievable story involving the event producer, Andy King.
Oh, the Andy King story from the Netflix documentary. It perfectly illustrates the level of desperation and ethical collapse. King recounted how McFarlane actually asked him if he would be willing to perform oral sex on a Bahamian customs official just to get trucks full of Evian water released for the festival attendees.
Unbelievable. He was willing to go through with it, too.
He said he was prepared to. Thankfully, it didn't come to that in the end. But just the fact that the request was made shows how completely off the rails the entire operation was. Basic necessities like water were being held up because of poor planning and McFarlane's chaotic management.
So while the images of these stranded wealthy millennials complaining about their tents went viral, who were the real victims here?
While those attendees certainly got scammed, the arguably more tragic victims were the local Bahamian workers. Hundreds of laborers, chefs, carpenters, service staff who worked tirelessly for weeks, often around the clock, trying to build the site and prepare for the festival.
They never got paid, did they?
Many of them were never paid for their labor when McFarland's company collapsed. The B put in the work based on his promises, and then he just left them high and dry. It's a stark reminder that often the people who pay the highest price for a scammer's failure are the most vulnerable, the ones who can least afford to lose out.
And McFarland's fate.
He was arrested and eventually pleaded guilty to multiple counts of wire fraud related to Fire Festival and other scams he was running. He was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison.
Did he show any remorse?
Apparently not much. Disturbingly, even after his initial arrest for the fire fraud, while out on bail, he was caught running another fraudulent ticket-selling scheme. It demonstrated a pretty profound lack of remorse and an almost compulsive need to keep scamming.
Okay, these examples, Belfort, McFarland, really highlight the power of image and audacity. Let's touch on two other figures who perfectly illustrate this audacity principle. The classic con man, Victor Lustig, and the very modern Anna Delvey.
Lustig is a legend in the con artist world, a true master of confidence from the 1920s.
And his most famous con, the ultimate big lie.
Selling the Eiffel Tower. Not once, but twice in 1925.
How is that even possible? How do you sell the Eiffel Tower?
Pure audacity, combined with exploiting a specific context. Paris was recovering from World War I, and the Eiffel Tower, originally built for the 1889 World Fair, was kind of rusty and expensive to maintain. There had been genuine public discussion about potentially dismantling it.
Okay, so there was a sliver of plausibility.
A tiny sliver. Lustig seized on this. He forged official-looking government documents, stationary credentials. He presented himself as a deputy director general of the Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs. He invited 5 or 6 leading scrap metal dealers to a secret meeting at a very prestigious, expensive hotel, the Hôtel de Crillon. The setting itself lent credibility.
And what was his pitch?
He told them, very confidentially, that the government had decided the Eiffel Tower was too costly to maintain and had secretly decided to sell it for scrap metal. He swore them to secrecy, saying it was politically sensitive.
So he created urgency and secrecy.
Exactly. And then came the masterstroke. He identified the most eager but perhaps slightly insecure dealer among the group, a man named André Poisson. Lustig hinted to Poisson that the bidding process might be competitive and that a little something extra, a bribe, might help secure the contract.
He asked for a bribe.
Yes. And Poisson, thinking he was getting an illegal inside edge, paid Lustig a hefty bribe on top of the agreed-upon price for the scrap metal rights.
So Poisson thought he was being corrupt to get the deal.
Precisely. Which meant when Lustig inevitably vanished with the money and Poisson realized he'd been conned, Poisson was too embarrassed and too legally compromised, having paid a bribe, to go to the police. He didn't want to admit he'd been fooled and had engaged in bribery himself.
That silence was Lustig's escape route.
His perfect shield. Lustig knew his mark's psychology, and because Poisson never reported it, Lustig actually tried and succeeded in pulling the exact same scam on another scrap dealer a few months later. The sheer nerve is just astounding.
Okay, now fast forward almost a century to Anna Sorokin, alias Anna Delvey, the Instagram heiress.
Anna Delvey is Lustig's spiritual heir for the digital age. She operated in New York City's elite social and financial circles between about 2013 and 2017.
And her scam was built entirely on
Appearance, purely on crafting an image. She pretended to be a wealthy German heiress, Anna Delvey, who supposedly had access to an $80 million trust fund back in Europe.
But she wasn't German, and she wasn't an heiress.
Nope. Anna Sorokin was born in Russia, grew up in Germany in a working-class family, and had no massive inheritance. The entire persona was fabricated.
So how does she convince people New York's elite are supposed to be savvy?
She understood the power of social proof and the superficiality of certain circles in the Instagram era. She dressed the part always in expensive designer clothes, often borrowed or bought and later returned. She stayed exclusively at high-end boutique hotels like 11 Howard in Soho, running up huge bills she couldn't pay. She threw lavish dinners, always flashing $100 bills for tips. Her Instagram feed was meticulously curated to project effortless wealth and access.
So she looked the part, and people just assumed the money was real.
Pretty much. She expertly name-dropped artists, collectors, tech entrepreneurs. She talked constantly about her ambitious plan to launch a massive private arts club, the Anna Delvey Foundation, and was always just about to secure funding or finalize paperwork for her massive trust fund wire transfer. She exploited the fact that in these circles, people often rely on appearances and social connections rather than doing actual background checks.
If you look rich and confident, you must be rich.
That was her gamble, and for a surprisingly long time, it worked. She successfully conned hotels out of months of free stays, convinced banks to give her substantial overdrafts based on fake documents, persuaded wealthy acquaintances to cover her travel expenses, essentially treating New York City and its elite inhabitants as her personal ATM, all based on projecting an image.
It's amazing how far sheer confidence and the right clothes can take you sometimes.
It really is. Both Lustig and Delvey demonstrate that sometimes the most effective cons aren't based on complex financial engineering, but on understanding and manipulating basic human psychology. Our deference to authority, our desire for exclusivity, and our willingness to believe what we see on the surface.
Okay, so after diving into all these incredible, often infuriating stories from Ponzi's IRCs to Madoff's veneer, Enron's accounting lies, Theranos' deadly tech fantasy, Belfort's excess, Fire's Instagram mirage, Lustig's tower sale, Delvey's socialite scam, let's try and pull it together. What are the common psychological levers we've seen work again and again in these big U.S.-centric scams?
Well, first and foremost, there's always that appeal to greed and aspiration. Sometimes it's blatant, like Ponzi's 50% return or Belfort's promise of instant riches. Sometimes it's more subtle, like Madoff's steady, market-beating consistency, or the desire to be part of Delvey's exclusive art club. But there's always that hook, the promise of getting something special, something better than average, a shortcut.
And that desire, that wishful thinking, it just shuts down our critical faculties, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. If a deal sounds too good to be true, it's often specifically designed to bypass your logical brain and hit you right in the desire center.
Okay, what else?
Then there's the profound power of authority bias. We are just wired to defer to people who look like they're in charge, who have the credentials, the reputation.
Madoff's NASDAQ chairmanship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Enron's leadership filled with PhDs and MBAs from top schools. Elizabeth Holmes assembling that board of former cabinet secretaries. We see the symbols of authority and success, and we automatically assume competence and trustworthiness. We think someone like that couldn't possibly be a crook. We trust the performance of success, often more than we trust verifiable data, or lack thereof.
And the third big one seems to be about surface appearances.
Absolutely. The obsession with appearance over substance, believing the veneer, the facade, whether it's Anna Delvey's designer outfits and stays at 11 Howard, or Fire Festival's slick marketing videos with supermodels, or even Victor Lustig's forged government stationery in meetings in posh hotels. In the absence of real, hard, verified information, we humans often substitute the impression of luxury, confidence, and success as sufficient proof of credibility. We judge the book by its very expensive, glossy cover.
So the really sobering, enduring lesson from looking at all this research, looking at these patterns across a century of American scams is what? Have we learned anything?
Well, the sobering part is that despite all the regulations that get passed after each major scandal, Sarbanes-Oxley after Enron, Dodd-Frank after 2008, increased SEC scrutiny after Madoff, the fundamental psychological tricks, they still work.
The same old playbook keeps working.
Pretty much. The only thing that really changes is the packaging, the window dressing. The scams get dressed up in modern clothes. Today, it might be a complex cryptocurrency scheme instead of postage coupons, or a fake AI startup instead of an energy trading platform, or a social media influencer scam instead of a boiler room.
But the underlying human vulnerabilities remain.
Exactly. Our deep-seated trust, our tendency towards wishful thinking, our desire to believe in shortcuts and magic bullets, that remains constant. And as long as that remains constant, the cycle of fraud seems destined to be, well, eternal.
And throughout this, we have to keep reminding ourselves and reminding you listening about the human cost. It's easy to get caught up in the drama and the audacity of the scammers themselves. They become almost like anti-heroes.
Right. The focus shifts to the perpetrator, not the victims.
But we have to consciously pivot away from that. We need to remember the real people whose lives were devastated. The Enron employees who lost their jobs and their retirement savings overnight. The Madoff retirees who had carefully saved their whole lives only to find it all gone. The Bahamian workers left unpaid by Billy McFarland. The patients put at risk by Theranos' fake tests. Behind every one of those huge, abstract, billion-dollar figures, there are real lives shattered, real communities betrayed.
Which brings us, I suppose, to a final, maybe provocative thought for you, the listener, to chew on. The question really isn't if fraud on this kind of massive scale will happen again here in the U.S.
It seems inevitable.
It seems absolutely inevitable, precisely because those psychological vulnerabilities we've been talking about aren't going away. They're part of human nature. So the only question that really matters is, who is running the next massive scam right now? Who is out there building that veneer of legitimacy, exploiting authority bias, maybe using complex new technology or impenetrable jargon as their cover? And when will that scheme finally, inevitably collapse?
It's a chilling thought that the next Madoff, the next Enron, could be operating right now.
It is. And maybe the toughest lesson is that we are often our own worst enemies in these situations. When a confident, charismatic figure comes along and tells us exactly what we desperately want to hear, that we can get rich quick, that we're smarter than everyone else, that this time it's different, our defenses just crumble, we want to believe.
If you want more of this kind of videos, hit that subscribe button now. Thank you.